Your coach is calling you soft. Well, tonight at the XL Center, can the Huskies respond? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I just want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all of your support. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show our gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games. So if you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. From the first whistle to the final drive, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, as always, let's bring in Dan Meehan of Exit 68. Let's get him in here now. Our Dan, like we've talked about this pre-show over the weekend, after the loss to Creighton. I think for me, when I did the show yesterday, you said something pre-show that kind of struck a chord, because I picked up on it, but it's the truth, which is, I don't think Dan tries to be negative. And I think that there hasn't been a somber Dan Hurley about a team, and, we're lucky for that for 2.5 years. And this was I wouldn't call it a breaking point, but probably a inflection point where he is essentially saying, you know what, guys, like, we're a decent team. We're a top 25 team. We're an NCAA tournament team, all of that, all the things he said, but we're not where we were the last couple of years. Do you get the sense that he is coming to that realization that unless this team turns things around pretty quickly, that the idea of a three-peat is gone by the wayside?
Yeah, I think we're at the crux in the season. We're more than halfway through the season here. And this team is, they're doing some things well. Offensively, there's not a whole lot of gripes, but defensively, their lapses, and those have just been really consistent throughout the entire season. Through Maui, when they had Liam, and now without him, some of those things are starting to rear their head even more so. You're going to get him back, hopefully, after the next 2, 3, 4 games, and kind of get back to who you were beforehand. But they've got some glaring issues that are not seemingly going away, and based off of Dan's comments after both the Creighton game and during yesterday's media availability, it just seemed to me like he understands, listen, it's now or never. If you want to start, figuring out who we're going to be if we're going to get to the tournament and do any damage, you got to figure that out now, because we're still without one of our best players in Liam McNeeley. Caravan's game time decision tonight, but he's not going to be back for a few more games, Liam. So you've talked about him asking a few of these players, namely, the wings of the sophomore class, to announce themselves in college basketball. That hasn't really happened yet this season. We've had flashes here and there of Jalen Stewart, some Jaden Ross on defense, but they haven't really put it all together the way that you'd hoped. And they've got some glaring holes, mostly on the rebounding, defensively, getting to loose balls, and just tenacity in general that are just not being shown, from this squad defensively. And I think he's just kind of impressing upon them, like, it's now or never. We got to figure this out if we're going to become a team that's actually going to do some real damage come March. Yeah.
I think some of these guys have sent like a text message to college basketball. They haven't made it a big announcement like that they're on the scene. It's been very or a Snapchat, because it kind of goes away after a while. I think that's probably the better assessment, right? For me, I think the biggest issue is just the physicality of this team is just really poor. And I think to quote a good buddy of the show and who writes for the Substack, Little Red, he aka Henry, is really calling people as a piece up right now, talking about how the fan base really should come together and not be negative about this team, but to kind of understand that they're going through trials and tribulations and try to rally around them. I agree with that. The fan in me is agreeing with that. The analyst in me also is also saying, because in part of his piece he talked about like how most fans haven't played a sport at a high level. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I did. So I understand what it takes from a physicality standpoint in a sport that you're elite at. That because all of these guys were elite basketball players coming out of high school, and you don't get a scholarship or NIL deal at UConn if you're mediocre. So I think what Dan is coming to the realization of is, although they may have the skill set, that they don't have the heart, the will to do what he wants them to do, which is like he's talking about stuff like lay it on the line, no regrets. I mean,
Yep.
I know I'm an old school guy because I'm 43 years old, but if a coach ever called me soft, I'd want to fight him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to go, oh man, and go back to my, apartment or whatever and go play NBA 2K or something like that. That it would piss me off to the point where I'm working out. I'm constantly trying to appease what he's not seeing in me. Right. And
Well, he's been saying this for a few weeks now.
Right. And that's the thing is like,
and it's still not happening.
The more he says it, the more it would start to piss you off. I mean, you're starting to see guys like Haase. He's right. Jalen Stewart said in a post-game press conference that a lot of guys in this team aren't being serious about being like professional. That's kind of alarming in the respect that don't like sound the alarms like, oh my God, the culture is going down the drain. It's just that this particular team, and I don't have names, I don't have guys you can point to, but we can see parts of it on almost at every level, right? For as good as Haas has been, for as good as Alex has been, they need to step up and do their part too, because the leadership on this team is severely lacking. If you're having your sophomore Jalen Stewart score a 15 or 16 points last game and then saying that the team has players that aren't serious, that's a big issue.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's been going on for a few weeks now. So you if it's already been an issue, you were still winning games, but now you've dropped 2
right
out of 4 games without Liam McNeeley, and your problems still persist. You're getting to a point where it's like, listen, as a coach, we can only give you so much coaching. I can only show you how many lapses in your defense are occurring through tape and analytics and watching film after games so many times. If this consistently keeps happening and we keep dropping games, I don't know what else to tell you. At the end of the season, Dan Hurley and the staff, I can assure you, are not going to be the ones that want to leave something on the table with regard to coaching. Like he said after the presser against the Creighton, it's either he starts questioning himself. Have I lost my edge? Am I not intense enough? So that reads to me as if I'm giving you all the coaching points and you're not taking the coaching, or if you are taking the coaching and you just can't execute it, I'm just going to drill you in practice. So at the end of the season, I can look myself in the mirror and say, I gave it everything I had. And I'm not saying it's a blame game, but he as a coach, he doesn't want to leave anything on the table, right? You don't want to get to the end of the season and feel like, you had a certain amount of potential that you could have reached, but you should have coached these guys a little harder. They never want to say that. So I think that they just kind of reached a crux in the season where you SHIT or get off the pot.
Yep, I agree. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about the fall in the rankings from 19 to 14 and 24 to 32 in the net, and then get into some of these defensive and rebounding struggles that this team is just desperately having. So we're gonna talk about all that coming back out of the break. This message is brought to you by PrizePicks, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. PrizePicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, PrizePicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in the action with PrizePicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less, at least 2 players. And if your pick hits, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right, 1,000 times your money, just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm all about, some football, like over-under stuff. This week on PrizePicks, I'm looking at Jalen Hurts for less than 183.5 passing yards and Travis Kelce for more than 69.5 receiving yards. It's a fun way to predict and easy to play. Plus, with PrizePicks, you can do flex play, which is you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. I think you have to do 3 or 4 picks. So if you're 50 or 70, 75%, with the app, you get your winnings fast, and sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. It's pretty easy to do. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with your host here, Mark Zanetto, and Dan Meehan of the owner and founder of Exit 68. I think we're both wearing your apparel today. I wore the wrench today because I want to inspire kind of that physicality, that kind of like, gritty nature of some of these Dan Hurley teams that don't get enough credit for kind of laying the foundation of how he started at UConn. That didn't have the scoring firepower that this team does. But if the 2020 men's basketball team guarded the 2024 basketball team right now, it would be, I think 2020 wins because of the defensive side of the ball and like the way they're getting after it. And they may be a rock fight, but they're going to win the rock fight.
That 2020 team probably wouldn't put up a whole lot of points, but I think they win in a close one just off of grit and heart.
Yeah, similar like the Villanova game. All right, so defensive struggles right now. Well documented. What are we? We're 127 in defensive efficiency according to KenPom. 7th in offense. Great. This is one of those things where you can get away with, when we were all enamored with how to build a juggernaut for UConn last year when that Michael Cohen piece came out on Fox Sports, and then we had him on, and then we talked about a lot of that and how this team was playing bulletproof basketball. That's all well and good. But when you can't guard anybody, I don't care if you're the number one offensive team in the country, because Alabama certainly learned that last year. You're not going to win a national championship. Like it's just not in the cards. Like you have to, when it comes down to it, when the rubber meets the road, you have to chest up and get in some guys' faces. And I don't know if we have the makeup to do that. Like, what do you see? Do you see anything that is going to change? Like, I certainly don't.
We've documented it on this podcast. We talked about it at length. The personnel on this team is just smaller than it has been in years past. And that's starting to show in some of the rebounding numbers. So strip everything away. If you're smaller and you're not as good at rebounding, if your center is one of the worst rebounding centers in the Big East, which Samson Johnson is, your guards are smaller and they're not going to back him up and come in from the perimeter and crash on the boards. You better give me some effort. You better show some grit and chase down loose balls and not give the other team second chances on offensive rebounds. If that's not going to be there, I don't know where you're going to win defensively. And that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing consistently right now with this team. Dan knows that they're smaller. I think he likes bigger guards. He would love it if Hassan Diarra and Solo Ball were 6'4", 6'5", like Steph Castle and Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton of the years past. But that's just not going to happen. If that's not there, you've got to be just more active defensively. Spread your arms, stay vertical on jump shots, crash the boards, and help out your centers down low who are, doing what they can, blocking shots. And so if that's not going to be there, the effort does. And right now it's not. And I think that's kind of the reason why we're hearing some of the comments we are from Hurley.
Yeah, I also think too, like, effort is one thing. The other thing too is like, you got to get back to the fundamentals. Like, what I mean? Like who would have ever said that Dennis Rodman at like 6'6" in the NBA would have been the best rebounder in the history of rebounding per capita, right? Based off of his size, there were years where he averaged like 17, 18 rebounds a game. It's desire, it's being in the right spot, it's positioning, understanding where the ball is going to come off. Like Cam had that, Tristan had that, Steph has that. The guys that are in UConn's rotation right now, even on the wing side, like don't have that kind of innate ability. Like I remember, and I'm sure you do too, how many times my dad would text me and say, man, Cam just has a nose for the ball. Like that's just like, you can't quantify that. You can't like, put a nice KenPom stat around it, but it's true. Like
it's called want to.
Every time we needed a big offensive rebound or a loose ball, Cam Spencer got one. Or if it wasn't him, it was Tristan. Or if it wasn't him, it was Steph. And these are guys who are elite at their position. They're not like, walk-ons that like, because I think
Cam
that's
Spencer was not the greatest athlete in the world, and he was
oh God,
down
no.
getting rebounds amongst the trees time and
Yes.
time
Well,
again.
I think what I'm seeing, I didn't kill Alex yesterday because I don't want to, because he's not. It's kind of like what Dan said about Solo. His intentions are good. He's not one of these guys who's just like, hey, because his quote was, he's not one of these guys who says, I'm a bucket and I'm just, I don't give a crap about anybody else, and I'm just trying to get my points to kind of like up my stature. That's not Solo's personality, and that's not this team's personality. Dan's talked about how nice this team is. So, but the difference though is I saw Alex do something after tweaking his ankle that really fired me up, and it should have fired up the team, and it really didn't do anything. Which is, he tweaks his ankle. He's trying to like work it out. They need a big offensive rebound. He goes up over everybody, and Alex doesn't have the best vertical leap. He's not the strongest guy on the floor. He comes down with it around 6 different people. They follow him. He goes to the 100%. And so like those are the moments that we need more of. I need that moment to be on a loop for this team for the rest of the year. I need Solo to be playing like that on defense. If he scored 4 less points a game and gave up less layups, we'd be better. Like I think that to me is what's really difficult to kind of understand, is like the want to has to be there. The, attention to detail. These guys aren't stupid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're not dumb kids. Like, these guys are smart. They're, they process information fast enough because the offense is still good. You got to do it on the defensive side too.
Yeah, I thought the comment about Hurley calling them like, listen, on the planes and the restaurants, these are really nice kids. But at the end of the day, it's one of my favorite clips of all time. I need some dogs. I need some lions. I need some dogs. And he's trying to rip that out of him. Like, it is one of the best. We get these great in the huddle snapshots on TV during the games. It was my favorite one of the season during the Creighton game. It's like, you got to dig out these balls on the defensive end. You need just effort. And then you let this guy get going because you weren't showing enough effort on defense. And now the team's back in the game. So I thought during Hurley's media availability yesterday, he made a nod to Solo defensively and compared him to Jordan Hawkins' sophomore year. He said at this point in the season, in his sophomore season, Jordan Hawkins became pretty sturdy defensively. Solo has good intentions and feels the stress of being a better defender, but the lapses are at every position, not just with Solo. So it's not just at the guard position.
I get it.
He wants to be able to take Hassan Diarra off the floor. He's playing too many minutes, which led to a couple, breakdowns defensively late in that game against Creighton. He doesn't want to play Hassan Diarra 38 to 40 minutes a game. The guy's drained by the end of the game. He's one of your best defenders. You want him locked in at the end of the game in a gotta have it possession defensively. And he saw some breakdowns in that because the guy was just gassed. But he needs to see something. He needs evidence during the game while he's standing on the sideline to give him the confidence to be able to take out his best defender for 10 minutes. Hassan Diarra should not be playing 38 minutes. He should be at 28 to 32 minutes a game and locked in every single one of those defensively, because that's when this team is at its best.
And then the other thing too I was going to say is, I think we all know that Karis Reed is more physically gifted than Sampson all around, and he's a better rebounder for sure. But the problem that Dan has with him is he just sees too many mental lapses. Like when it comes to defensive and offensively, like turnovers where he's getting yanked out of the game or whatever. And it's just like, if my guy can pay attention to detail and stay on the floor, I think you'd start to see a flip in those minutes, because when Terrace is locked in, he's pretty damn good, as we've seen. And so I think that's kind of been a regression there from kind of what we thought this two-headed monster was going to be. That's kind of taken they've slid back down to earth a little bit. We had this conversation off the air too, and then we'll get into a little bit about this upcoming schedule. Like, everybody that's telling me that Alex Caravan is overrated and all this other stuff, it's like, you're really not paying attention to who Alex Caravan is. Like, in my opinion, Alex Caravan is never going to be a number one option on any team he plays for, whether he plays a 15-year career in the NBA, whether he plays 10 years there, where he goes to Europe for 5, or wherever. He could be in a pickup game, and he's not going to be the number one option because Alex is limited in some of his athletic ability. Like, that's just the truth. His lateral quickness, his vertical leap, anything. I mean, he's 6'8", so that helps, right? At 6'8", he's becoming a kind of an elite defender on the low blocks. He's blocking a ton of shots this year. He's not getting taken advantage of on that. He's getting it taken advantage of off the dribble. These are things that he needs to get better at the next level. But currently, he's never going to be the number one option. Like, I don't think that asking him averaging 16 or 17 points a game was ever a thought where he was like, well, we're going to run everything through Alex. No, there was doubling down on Solo. There was doubling down on Haas. There was getting, Jalen Storr. Is he going to make that big leap? We're without Liam McNeeley. And the last point before I get your thoughts on this is it's almost like when you lose your best player, you suffer on offense and defense. And that's what we did. We lost Liam.
Yeah. I'm seeing a little of that with Alex with in the last few years. Alex, where he's most effective is coming off screens, running without the ball, cutting Princeton back cuts and being delivered, those balls by the guards. With Liam McNeeley going down, who was one of their best playmakers and sets people up so well, Alex is trying to have to do a little bit more offensively and insert himself into more of the game plan schematically on the offensive end. And I think some of that might, maybe his legs. He's been playing a ton of minutes out of necessity, by the way. Like, sure. Alex, every night you look at the box score, he's out there 35 to 40 minutes every single night. He can't take a blow because they need him on the court. Even we see him go down with the ankle injury. You mentioned him going up for that rebound after coming down, and bending his ankle. Hurley couldn't take him out of the game. Out of necessity, he needs to stay on the floor. Any other time in the season, if you're not hampered with your roster and have guys going down, like, he comes out of that game immediately. And I think Hurley did not want him to have to play every single minute the rest of that game. And I don't think Alex came out after that at all.
No.
So I think you're seeing some of, the stresses on offense with Liam being down, adding to Alex's minute total might be bleeding into his defensive effort a little bit.
All right, we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to talk about some must-win games on the schedule and the season outlook going forward. We have Butler tonight at the Excel Center. We'll be back right after the break. All right, it's our friends at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep your action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate. The variety of bets. Every game is exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, winning around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on the favorite or the underdog, game last night in the college football playoff, Notre Dame was plus 8.5. The field goal made a lot of people happy and a lot of people sad. And if you're just looking to get some extra excitement, maybe it's the playoffs for you, FanDuel has you covered. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto, and Dan Meehan, owner and founder of Exit 68, and, of course, a Locked On UConn contributor. So we got Butler tonight. It's a team that is I've said this a few times, and I'm kind of like sick of saying it, not very good. But I feel like every time we play a team that's, in that 90 to 70 range, 88 in the net ranking for them, they have a tough strength of schedule. For Butler's 22, so they played some tough teams. We had a close game with them at home when they were at home on the road. So I do think that this is a quote unquote easier opponent, but Butler's got some big folks. If they're without Alex, this is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think this you're going into this game. Butler's 8-10, 1-6 in the Big East Conference, so they haven't performed well there. They're 90 overall in KenPom. This is a 73rd ranked offensive rating team, 122 defensively. They only score about 72 points a game. They allow 71. So this is a bottom 3 team in the conference. I don't look at this as a must-win. It is a can't-lose game.
Yeah,
you can't lose this game at home against a Butler. So, I don't like to talk down to any opponent, especially when we've got 2 of our best players who might not be playing. But this is a can't-lose game. Dan Hurley made some comments about, he's actually glad for the change of scenery. He doesn't want to go back to the scene of the crime that was quote-unquote haunting at Gamble Pavilion after the Creighton game, their first loss there, and in their first home loss in 28 games. So I want to see some tenacity, some want to, some heart. I want some dogs, some lions. I want to see all that tonight against Butler.
Can I say something real quick, Dan? Because let me say something. The net rankings right now, UConn's at 32, Butler's at 88. We all know how this works. If you don't know how it works, this would be a quad 3 win or loss tonight because it's at home against the 88th ranked team in the net. If UConn loses this game, they're going to drop big in the net. If they win this game, they're probably still going to drop. That's the point. Like, they need to not only win this game, they need to win this game with what Dan is talking about, ferocity, just want to, grittiness. This can't be like a squeaker where you win by 4 points. I'm sorry. Like, I get a win no matter what. But if this team wants to progress, where they're not like an 8 or a 9 seed when the NCAA tournament comes around, you cannot win this game by 4 points. You have to kick this team's ass in XL Center and get this crowd behind you, and kind of the fan base that's super spoiled and has completely been a little bit unhinged with some of the comments I've seen on social media is kind of crazy. So they need to not only win this game, they need to win it convincingly.
Yeah, show me something, this game, and then looking ahead to the next two, this is a small little sample size of the season that I look at all three of these games as must wins. You're at home tonight against Butler. Then you travel to Xavier, a team that has already played you close. You're probably still going to be without Liam McNeeley in that one. And then you're home against DePaul. Those are three of the teams that are in the middle or towards the bottom of the Big East standings. That is before you go into an extremely tough, backloaded part of UConn's schedule. These are going to be fun games for you and I. Going to some of these, you've got this team then has 5 games against, they haven't played Marquette yet. They have to travel to Marquette, play St. John's twice, and then still go to Creighton. There could be 3 or 4 losses in that 5-game stretch. You need to win these next 3 games against Butler, Xavier, DePaul, and just try to, don't play with fire going into a stretch of the season where you're ending against some of the best teams in the conference. Scary.
Yeah, I never thought I would agree with that statement, and I was hesitant to agree with it like before the last game against Creighton, because I saw some good things, but I still was kind of the wins were glossing over, the evidence of the out rebounding. Talk to me. You did some research on this. You told me about their rebounding last year and the year before, was pretty incredible. Even in games where they lost, they still were out rebounding people. So give me that stat, and then we're going to talk about it real quick.
So I'm just kind of looking at, and I say some of those games are must win or can't lose. And I'm looking at that in the lens of where we might be seated if you have a certain amount of losses. Because historically,
But Dan, here's the thing. I don't mean to cut you off, but if they lose some of these games, and then they lose to the better opponents, and they lose to a couple of the points that then
double-edged sword.
Who the hell even knows that they get in? If you're telling me that's the thing is it being a 5 seed or a 6 seed right now can easily be on the 10 or 11 or first team out. I hope we get the Tom Izzo treatment that if we're a bubble team, we get an 8 seed just for fun. But I'm just saying this team cannot be complacent. If they lose one of these games in the next 3 before they play Marquette, or before they play St. John's, they're going to be on
playing with fire.
Watch.
You're playing with fire. And so I've kind of taken that screenshot of this season because it felt a little similar to 22-23 when they lost those 7 games in January. So I just looked back. Some people, no one's comparing this team to last year's team.
No, yeah.
But if you were to look to a historical Dan Hurley team and compare that, this kind of unsung vibe, where you might be struggling a little bit, but you can regain it just prior to tournament time, it would be that 22-23 team. So I just looked back at some of the numbers from that team and how they performed rebounding wise. What was going on there when they were losing those 7 games. So through the first 18 games of the 22-23 season, UConn lost the rebounding battle 4 times against Bama, Oklahoma State, Georgetown, and Creighton. They won all 4 of those games. UConn lost 8 games in total that season. They were never out rebounded in any of those losses. So even when they were losing games and the world was falling down that January, we all remember it, they were still doing things well. They weren't being out rebounded like this team is. I think they were plus 144 that entire season in rebounds. So they were always rebounding the ball and doing something well. This UConn team is 337th in adjusted tempo this year. They play slow. They're a half-court team. They don't get out on the break like that 22-23 team did with DeAndre Jackson flying high type plays. So if this team, who is 5th offensively in the country this year, that's great. But if you're going to play a half-court game, play slow, and you have severe lapses on defense and rebounding, you better do something else well. because there's a reason why all these games, even when they are seemingly shooting well, that's why all these games are close. You're giving the other team secondary chances on offense. I saw one last game during Creighton where the ball literally hit the floor before someone's hands on a rebound.
Oh my God, dude.
Gets kicked out to Stephen Ashworth, and he hits a 30-foot three that was just backbreaking when you needed a stop. So it's stuff like
there's
that.
There's just
where
so many instances of that this year.
You look at the box score, and this team is shooting 50, 40, 80. Us. Why is it a 2-point game? We're winning on paper. Though that's the reason why. So
yeah. And those are all great stats. I appreciate you pulling them up. And I think someone asked in the media availability, it might have been Joe Ruda of the Hartford Courant, about that, like the January swoon from 22-23. And Dan didn't go into the rebounding aspect of it, which kind of talks about the defensive struggles and physicality aspect we talked about last segment. But what he did say was that it's almost not worth kind of comparing those two teams, because he's like, we were so dominant in the out of conference that it was really just about us adjusting to Big East play that year and having those 6 losses in 8 games, 7 losses in that month. And then obviously everything kind of turned around come tournament time. So I totally agree with your assessment, because it's wild to me that they won games sometimes, where they were out rebounded, and even when they lost, they didn't get out rebounded in the games that they lost. You can't look at the same stuff this year, though. I mean, they lost to Colorado, Dayton, Butler, Providence, Georgetown, Creighton, right? These games where they've been out rebound, you like in your notes, you guys, they're 3-3.
In comparison, in the 6 games that UConn out of their 18 that they've played this year, that they've been out rebounded, they're 3-3 in those games.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to, I know the personnel is different this year than it was last year and the year before. I'm not trying to compare them a direct 1-to-1, but we are lucky enough as UConn fans to have a case study of what works
right
in a national tournament and Big East play. This is, if you're not going to do certain things well, you better do these things well, because that's what wins national championships. So we have the luxury of looking at certain case studies and saying, I just think that this personnel lends itself a little bit more to that 22-23 team. And we can try to draw some comparisons of, if you're not going to, even you're already good and elite offensively still, even with guys out, you're still a 5th offensive rated team in the country. Do these things well. You don't have to be a top 20 defensive team to go far in the tournament. We saw it with Alabama last year, who was they were ranked over 100 defensive rating, but they were an elite offensive team. If you want to look to a team and say we can get to a Final Four if we just do that, UConn just needs to clean it up a little bit, and they could still go far.
And I'll make a prediction. If they get to inside the top 80 defensively this season, which is a huge jump from where they are, they're 122 right now, maybe like 75th or something like that, and the top 75 defensive teams in the country, then they would, and their offense stays the same or even gets a little better. I think, especially with Liam coming back, then this team has a shot to make a run. But if they stay around that 100, high 90s, because Alabama, I think, was 96 going into the Final Four. They were like over 100 during the year. They like some of the adjusted metrics changed going into the Final Four, but for the most part, I mean, everyone knew what Alabama was. They're a run and gun team, and if they play some good defense, but that team was physical. Like, that's the difference. Like, the Alabama team would at least kind of like challenge you defensively, and if they got beat because they knew they were going to shoot a 3 on the next possession. But this team isn't like that. This team is, like, as you mentioned with the tempo, it's not the same type of like run and gun offense that you're seeing in Alabama or even Kentucky with Mark Pope. So it's going to be difficult for this team to really kind of lock in unless they get their defense to like I said, inside that top 80, where then maybe we can start talking about bulletproof basketball like Dan was talking about, or maybe there's a little Kevlar, but like it's not completely bulletproof. But so
I would just love to. We can look into these metrics and everything, but I'd love to see them improve some of them. Not so much because I care what it looks like on paper. It's because of what it would mean for them on the court. If UConn could just crack, they've been getting worse defensively. They've been hovering around that 100, defensive rating number for weeks now. They're, I think, are 127th now defensive. If you can crack the top 90, that means on the court you're showing more heart. Samson Johnson is not overnight out of the blue going to become some elite rebounder. If they improve their defensive rating and if they beat the crap out of, teams like Butler and Xavier the next few games and really show some want to and some ferocity and intensity defensively, I think if you are improving your numbers defensively in the metrics, that just means this team is playing harder. So that's all I want to see.
Well, we got a game tonight. We are going to do a live reaction show. I will do it. Hopefully Dan can join us. I don't know if we're going to win tonight, but all I want to see tonight is the type of effort that Dan can go and say, there's no way we can lose this game if we give this type of effort. You think we're coming away with a W tonight?
I need some dogs. I need some Lions. I need some dogs. It's going to be a W in the win column. I think it's going to be a great crowd at XL Center tonight. We rebound. We're going to look good. I need some dogs.
All right. You heard it here first. This will be out pretty shortly after we we jump off of here. So this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, for Dan Meehan of Exit 68 and a Locked On UConn co-host and contributor. Stay locked on. Stay connected. No softness tonight.
Don't be soft.
Be tough. Don't be soft. Be tough. Keep those toughness meters got to be like, and they got to ratchet them things up tonight. Go UConn.
Go Huskies.